Is up, guys? The doctor's back in the office, and today we're going to be matchmaking all the fights that we want to see following the completion of UFC 329, Max Holloway versus McGregor 2. Let's just jump straight into this. Let's talk about Max Holloway, because Max Holloway is in a really odd position here, in my opinion, where, you know, he wins, gets millions of dollars richer, takes absolutely no damage whatsoever, but his stock and kind of his place in the UFC doesn't really change, where you don't really think any more of him or less of him after this McGregor win. I mean, it is a win, but you know what I mean. Had Max kind of came out there and dominated McGregor and just beat the brakes off of an old man, maybe you're doing Max versus Arman for number one contender, and you're like, oh, if he wins this, he's fighting for the belt. I just can't really see them doing that right now. So I think Max is going to fight down in the rankings, but he's going to fight down against a guy who's very notable. I think you give Max Holloway Mauricio Rufy. I think this fight makes a lot of sense in terms of the UFC really loves Mauricio Rufy. It's been pretty obvious. He was trying to weigh in as the backup for this fight. I think it gives Max kind of a nice bounce back down at 155 against a primary striker, actually an only striker, Mauricio Rufy. This guy's not really going to try and take you down whatsoever. He is very dangerous. Like, do I think Max Holloway could lose this? Yes, but strictly striking and no grappling, that's really great for Max. And I kind of look throughout the rest of that top five, whether it's a Paddy, a Charles, who he's already got destroyed by, an Ilya, who's already knocked him out, or an Arman who can really grapple him. I think this kind of makes the most logical sense for Max Holloway in the sense that he's not going to have to deal with any fucking grappling. It's an old versus a new guard matchup. Max Holloway, I will say this, was talking about the possibility of fighting at 170 pounds against like an Islam or a, you know, other guys. He would get fucking killed by every single one of them. Look what Islam Makhachev did to Charles Oliveira. Look what Charles Oliveira did to Max Holloway. Imagine what Islam would fucking do to Max. Prates would send Max's chin to 1,000 pieces. Like if you threw the Millennium Falcon and dropped it, the Lego version, and it fucking spread out everywhere, that's what would happen to Max Holloway's chin. Rufy, you know, he's on a nice win streak. He's got wins over Fiziev and Chandler, and that Bobby Green win is aging very well for him, who we'll talk about later in this video. I want to get this fight going as soon as possible. It took no damage. I know Max wants to spend some time with his family, take some time off. Fuck that. We don't care about your family here. You took no damage. Let's fight, brother. And I don't want to hear any talk about anybody from the comments, or I've seen this on social media about a fucking trilogy between Max Holloway and Conor McGregor. That absolutely disgusts me. Conor McGregor will talk about his next fight and who I want to see him face after this, but that might be the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. And for Max Holloway to come out here and say, you know, let's get this trilogy in, brother. Let's get this more money for me. And then everybody booing him was fucking hilarious. That was a shit Max Holloway impression, by the way. That was pretty fucking funny, but it was also insanely tone deaf. Nobody wants to watch that shit again. McGregor's not reliable, and he's old and broken. Whatever. We're going to give Conor McGregor a rightful next match. And let's just talk about Conor McGregor, because Conor McGregor, we don't really know the nature of his injury yet. We do know it was something internally on whatever his right knee, I believe, and it's probably a meniscus in my opinion, maybe an ACL, because he's just so old. But the only time for this fight to happen has to be now. You see the thumbnail. It has to be Michael Chandler. It just has to be. I don't make the rules here. I just follow them. Unk versus Unk. McGregor, he's pretty much done in my opinion. Him losing, I think it makes it even more likely that we actually see Michael Chandler versus Conor McGregor. It's at 170. We don't need a trilogy against Max. There's no reason to run it. You know, I don't want them scamming us out of any more money. I know we don't do pay-per-views anymore, but we're spending a lot of time and betting, and some idiots are betting on Conor McGregor to beat Max Holloway. Let's get Conor a W against Michael Chandler, right off on a horse into the sunset. Michael Chandler is so bad that maybe Conor could win this. I also think Nate Diaz versus Conor 3 is also an option. I wouldn't say that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And I'm going to put out a video on this on TikTok. Could Michael Chandler beat a one-legged Conor McGregor? I was thinking about that. Like, Conor McGregor, right after he's walking out of the octagon and going into the locker room, if Michael Chandler meets him in the locker room and they kind of have like a backstage brawl WWE style, who's walking out? I still think Conor McGregor chins Michael Chandler, even on one leg, hobbling around. Also, I was thinking about this. What was Michael Chandler thinking as he saw Conor McGregor crumbled to the ground? You know, was he happy? Was he sad? I was thinking like he's got to be at least a little bit sad, because You know, he could have gone through this whole training camp, not really cut that much weight, and then stepped in there thinking, oh shit, there's a good chance I get knocked out, and then your opponent just crumbles to the floor and you made millions of dollars and took no damage. Like, he's got to feel really jealous to see Max Holloway do that. But then I was also thinking, there's some Michael Chandler dark magic here where he's sitting cage side for this fight, and he just kind of used his mystical American Missouri powers and made sure that no one can actually have a real MMA fight against Conor McGregor except himself. So I think this is written in the stars. We're going to get Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. I'm telling you, it's going to happen, and I can't wait. I can't wait to see Michael Chandler versus Conor McGregor sometime next year, probably in the spring. Let's move on, though. Let's talk about the co-main event. Let's talk about Paddy Pimblett. Really impressive win over BSD. Beautiful submission. Again, BSD, one of the most clueless, dumb people you'll ever see, where he just did exactly what everybody said he shouldn't do. Throw the head kick and immediately shoot with his head on the inside. Get submitted by Paddy Pimblett. And Paddy's got some real juice behind him right now. I think you have to capitalize on that. I think this is the fight that has to happen. We need to get Paddy Pimblett versus Ilia Topuria. It has to happen around. No more fucking joking around. It's the perfect time for it to happen because you may never get a better opportunity than this. Like, when Paddy Pimblett lost to Justin Gaethje, I was like, wow, we can kiss Paddy versus Ilia goodbye. We're never going to see them fight each other. Well, then Ilia loses to Justin Gaethje, and he's without a belt. And Paddy Pimblett beat BSD, so now it's like, this is a perfect kind of bounce back for Ilia Topuria against a guy in Paddy Pimblett who is so incredibly defensively irresponsible, can't really box that well, obviously has great submission game, but he leaves himself so open to being hit. You got to figure Ilia Topuria is going to find that death touch, that nuclear power shot at some point during the fight. And I think, like, obviously there's a chance Paddy Pimblett wins. I mean, who knows? I thought, like, Justin, you know, he kind of stood in there against Gaethje, styled on BSD. This guy keeps kind of proving me wrong, even though I picked him to beat BSD. You know what I mean? Like, Paddy Pimblett has proved me wrong throughout his career. He has this certain plot armor and aura around him, and he hasn't been knocked out. So it's like, could he beat Ilia Topuria? Maybe. And winner of this gets a title shot. You put this in a stadium. It is probably not only the biggest fight you can make in lightweight, it is probably the biggest fight you can make in all of the UFC, especially one that doesn't even have a belt on the line. Here's how you match up lightweight. You do Charles versus Arm and Hammer. You do Charles versus Arman. Whoever wins that fights Gaethje early next year because Gaethje doesn't want to fight the rest of the year, which is fine. All the timelines can match up. You don't do Paddy versus Max. You know, I've seen dudes on TikTok say that. That's fucking stupid. I hate that. Max Holloway would put a dent in Paddy Pimblett's head, by the way, and win 49-46. Do Charles versus Arman. Ilia versus Paddy. We talked about Max. He could do Mauricio Rufi. And also, I want to end this off before I go on to talk about BSD. That Charles call out in the post-fight like press conference thing, please never mention her name. Now listen, Paddy, I've been kind of a fan with you. I picked you to beat BSD. And listen, the BSD win was nice. I'm happy for you. You know, that's a good win, kid. Never mention our name. We would render you unconscious and take you to the deepest waters. You'd end up just like your dad and our son, Justin Gaethje, if you keep running your mouth. So please never mention Charles Oliveira. Because Charles Oliveira is taking you down, submitting you, and on the feet, he's going to chin you brutally. So please never mention us. I'm a pro Paddy Pimblett. Don't get me wrong. I'm rooting for you. I picked you to beat BSD. Don't mention Charles. Mention anybody else. I don't give a fuck. Don't mention Charles Oliveira. We will send you to Agartha. We'll send you back to your shithole little city in England. Whatever. Moving on to BSD. Now, Benoit Saint-Denis. I am actually glad I don't have to talk about this guy in like a legitimate title conversation, because it was kind of funny. Ooh, BSD, number 5, number 6 in the world. Ooh, BSD, one more win, he's going to put himself in a title contention. That was funny. But deep down, did we really believe that was going to happen? Did we really believe BSD was actually going to be fighting for the belt? We don't have to gaslight ourselves into thinking this marauder can win it. And Paddy ended his reign of terror. You kind of deserve this for what you did to Beneil Dariush. He did the one thing that he shouldn't have done, threw a head kick, puts his fucking neck on the outside, gives up his neck, which he does to every fighter, gives neck to every fighter in the first 10 seconds, and gets it put in that guillotine grip, transitions to a Darce, and he died. Now, BSD, the good thing about that loss of your BSD is, well, you know, you have things to work on, which we've all known, but now it got badly exposed in a very high-level fight, a co-main of a massive card. But the good thing is you could bounce back pretty fast. You took no damage whatsoever, and I think BSD versus Rafael Fiziev makes a lot of sense. Now, I saw people saying BSD versus the winner of Gamrot Quillen, which I would agree with that. But that's a month away, and I was thinking, well, if that's like a 5-round fight, BSD, I don't really know how long he's going to want to wait, and you don't really know exactly when a Gamrot or a Quillen would bounce back after 5 rounds, or like when that fight would even take place. So I think this makes sense. Fiziev, took a little bit of damage against Manuel Torres. People forget, man, Fiziev said he couldn't even see out of one eye, so I know Fiziev's taking a little bit of time off. Gives Fiziev a jump up the rankings because, he loses the Gaethje, then he's kind of got to fight dudes who are a little bit lower than him or unranked, like the Bahamondes fight, the Rufi fight, the Torres. He deserves a legitimate jump up. He's been around for forever. Finally gets kind of that highlight reel KO that all the people on Twitter... Fiziev's world-class Muay Thai, man. This guy's got crazy power, and he just doesn't finish anybody, but he gets an insane KO over Manuel Torres. I would like to see this. I would like to see Fiziev possibly take BSD's head off, It gives Fiziev, if he beats BSD, like one last kind of legit title run, in my opinion. He's proven now that he can knock out guys. And BSD's chinny. He leaves himself very open. I think this would be a really fun fight. Do it somewhere in Europe or something, or like Qatar or Saudi, you know what I mean? Saudi Arabia. Do it something like that. I'd be really excited to see Rafael Fiziev take on BSD. Let's keep moving down the card. Let's talk about, I believe this is going to be Mario Bautista, maybe Cory Sandhagen. Mario Bautista, man. A nice, he's in a weird spot, though. I will say this, because it was a nice win over Cory Sandhagen, where, like, he nearly ripped Cory Sandhagen's knee/hamstring apart, dropped him in the 3rd round. It was kind of concerning that Mario Bautista dropped the second to a one-legged Cory and looked gassed, but it was still a good win. I'm going to give Mario Bautista that. But he's in a weird spot in the sense that he's lost to Umar. The division's all kind of fucking weird because of, Merab versus Jan 3. I don't know what's happening with that. Merab's wrestling Henry Cejudo and jumping off cliffs and with a fucked up nose, mind you. I figured, imagine you back in December when Jan had beaten Merab, you would have said, oh, these guys will rematch in like June or July, and it just hasn't happened. Or maybe even UFC 330. I was thinking at the latest they get it in August. That's what I was thinking, like late spring before I came back home to New York. I was thinking, these guys got to fight at latest August. And we haven't heard anything from Petr Yan. At least I see Merab's alive. I never see Petr Yan. It's ridiculous. Merab would have fought like 8 times already had he won, which he didn't. He got his ass kicked. That being said, I guess like once Song loses to Umar, maybe you do Song Yadong versus Mario Bautista. I don't really even know what you do because Mario's friends with Sean O'Malley. And, honestly, I guess if Merab versus Yan 3 gets scheduled soon and then Merab loses to Petr Yan, maybe you do Mario Bautista versus Merab. I really like that fight. Even like Song Yadong versus Mario Bautista doesn't really make that much sense because Mario Bautista would beat Song Yadong and he's ranked above him now, I believe, or will be. The top of this division is just so odd. I have no clue what to make of it. I think I already mentioned Mario Bautista and Sean O'Malley are friends, so that knocks that out. What's he going to rematch Umar again? Like, that doesn't really make any sense. Like, shit's got to get moving at the top of this division. I get everybody didn't love when Merab was champ, but at least he was consistently active and just kind of beating dudes off his front porch with a bat. You know what I mean? Like, fucking 49-46, 48-47, random finish against Sean O'Malley. He was just moving people out the way. At least the line kept moving for people to lose to Merab. But now Petr Yan's kind of holding it up, and I love Petr Yan. That's my guy. I think he's going to beat Merab in the rematch. But it is concerning we've just seen nothing of this guy, and I've heard nothing about this fight. It needs to get scheduled soon. I'm like, it can't be a year without you fighting. I know we're not there yet, and I think it will get scheduled before then, but it's just ridiculous, the oddness of the top of the bantamweight division. Shit's got to get moving. I want to see O'Malley versus Petr Yan. I want to see Merab versus Petr Yan 3. Like, I want Umar. I don't really want Umar to do shit. Who am I lying? Whatever. Let's move on to Cory Sandhagen. See, I fucking lied about Umar there. But Cory Sandhagen loses to Mario Bautista, as we all know. And, it's a sad day for white people like myself. All the stance switch, bladed stance glazers are sad. He's 2-3 in his last 5, and his only finishes over a wash, Devison, Figueiredo. And the Cory Sandhagen title run is probably over. And, I think a lot of people want to see Cory fight, what's it called? Fight Payne Talbot next. And, I definitely want to see that fight. But I think he's going to be out the rest of the year with this hamstring injury. And I think David Martinez honestly makes a lot of sense. I know, but this is bedtime. Actually, I never changed it. Well, this should be fucking David Martinez, not Payne Talbot. That doesn't make any sense. But imagine this is David Martinez. Don't forget that Payne Talbot's here, because Payne Talbot I don't think is going to want to wait around for like another couple months. Like, he hasn't even fought this year. His last fight was against Cejudo. It's been ridiculous. I have no clue what they're doing with him. He's just DJing underground MMA events, and they're just gay porn on the side too. It makes no sense. Martinez got injured. He was scheduled to fight Umar, so the timeline's going to kind of match up with him and Sandhagen. I don't know what David Martinez's injury is. And it's also a sad downfall for Cory Sandhagen. This dude's got to fight fucking David Martinez, who, yes, like, I think David Martinez is decent, but he's scraped by Cheeto Vera, and he's just, I don't know, he's whatever. That's what I think of when I think of David Martinez. He's won a bunch of fights in a row. He's kind of next up in terms of, like, who's in the division, and I guess Cory Sandhagen can win this one and get back on track. Let's talk about the rest of the guys on this card, who I believe we're going to talk about Bobby Green next. Now, Bobby Green, why the fuck am I talking about Bobby Green? Brandon Royval, forget that. We're talking about Brandon Royval. We're going to match him with Kyoji Horiguchi. Let me explain why the fuck was I talking about. I have CTE. What a comeback, though, from Brandon Royval. Takes a ton of damage his last two fights against Manel Kape and, what's his face? The fucking champ. Joshua Van. You're kind of thinking it's done with Brandon Royval. Then he comes back with this kind of y'all must have forgot performance against Loner Kavanagh, where he controls the majority of the fight with his jab, with his pace, which is his size, mixes in the wrestling and the grappling very well. And we've never seen him really wrestle like that. And his chin holds up. He didn't nearly kind of die in that second round, but he impressively submits Loner Kavanagh. And he's in a weird spot because he's lost to Joshua Van. He's lost to Pantoja twice, lost to Manel Kape, beat Tyra, beat Kai Car France, beat Moreno twice. Right, he's beat Moreno twice, or did I make that up? He's beat Brandon Moreno. He's got a really impressive resume. And you could run back the Tyra rematch, which I wouldn't be mad about. But I think him versus Horiguchi is a really fun one. Horiguchi, it'll be interesting to see how kind of he deals with another bigger flyweight. We saw him dominate Tagir Ulanbekov. I think Brandon Royval obviously levels above Tagir Ulanbekov. But both guys put a pace on dudes. Horiguchi's got a ton of movement. I would just really like to see this. This smells of and reeks of an Apex main event. Let's do Brandon Royval versus Kyoji Horiguchi. Now we're not going to talk about Bobby Green. We're talking about Loner Kavanagh. Loses to Brandon Royval. Had moments in the fight, but I think there's issues with him where he's going to have to learn from him and continue to improve his grappling, his cardio. Even sometimes I feel like he's a little too stationary with his striking, kind of just relies a lot on his raw power, maybe move a little bit more. I don't know. Maybe that's just me talking my ass, but that's what I think. Now, we all kind of thought he was going to sleep Brandon Royval and kind of insert him straight into that title picture and really kind of continue to push along that new era of flyweight. Well, then he gets schooled and just really struggle with the size and range of Brandon Royval. Let's give Mesut Almabayev. I really, really like this fight in terms of I think this is very tough for Loner Kavanagh, but it continues to not continue to show his improvement, but it can really test him again, where Almabayev is fresh off a dominant win over Charles Johnson, where he looked really the best he ever has. He might have been on steroids. He's fighting in Azerbaijan, I have no clue, and has wins over Jose Ochoa, future champ, Alex Perez, and his only loss is to Manel Kape. He's very good. Flyweight stacked. This is, again, a very hard fight for Loner because he's got to deal with the really impressive grappling of Almabayev. But both guys are right next to each other in the rankings. Flyweight's just so fucking good. And I just think this kind of makes the most sense. And it also screams of an Apex main event. Now, let's talk about Bobby Green. Bobby Green gets called out. Dan Hooker, just make Bobby Green versus Dan Hooker. I saw some people saying, let's do Bobby Green versus Beneil Dariush. I don't really want to see Beneil Dariush get slimed out by Bobby Green. No offense, I love Bobby, but I don't want to see that shit happen. Give Beneil Dariush like Grant Dawson or something. This would be a really fun striking fight, mostly on the feet. I think this was supposed to happen back in 2023, but Dan Hooker, I believe, was injured with an arm injury. Bobby Green being on a 4-fight win streak in 2026, it can't be talked about enough how insane that is. And if he beats Dan Hooker, he's going to be a top 10 guy, which is also hilarious. Imagine we actually get a Bobby King Green title run in 2026. I also like this for Dan because, he's on this losing streak where he's lost to BSD and Arman, who are just good and actual talented grapplers. Bobby Green's not really going to grapple. Maybe blast a double leg every now and then, but I wouldn't expect that against Dan Hooker. He's going to keep this on the feet. It's a step down in competition for Dan Hooker, which I think he needs at this point. Very winnable fight for both guys. I'd be really excited to see this one. Let's talk about Terrance McKinney. Now, Terrance McKinney, you can match up with anybody. Brutal loss to Bobby Green where he should have won it. Let's just give Ignacio Bahamondes. McKinney, the first round gimmick's funny. Bahamondes, if he gets out the first round, will just slam this dude out brutally. And McKinney's just incapable of leaving the first round, so it doesn't really matter. Another fun fighter. Bahamondes has lost 2 in a row. The Fiziev loss was legit robbed against Musayev because Musayev's a dirty cheat. And as long as Ignacio Bahamondes survives the first round, he will make Terrance McKinney quit. and this guy's got a glass chin. So I would probably pick Bob Monas to win this, but again, Terrance McKinney is very dangerous in that first round. Let's move on to Robert Whittaker. Robert Whittaker beats Nikita Krylov, kicks his ass, working the jab, looking sharp with movement, landing straight punches. Now, you wouldn't have thought that if you were watching the fight, because all Joe Rogan and DC were talking about were how fat Robert Whittaker was, how doughy he looked in the midsection. Fuck you. Then you got Drew Brees and Theo Von jumping in the second round, listen, if this was one thing, if it was a random prelim fighter, Robert Whittaker was a former undisputed champ, one of the best middleweights to ever do it, and you got these fucking idiots talking about him. But you just know Robert Whittaker is going to be sent up the rankings and get people wanting to fight Ozdemir. I think logically that actually makes more sense. But tell me Robert Whittaker versus Khalil Rountree doesn't scream UFC fight night main event. And it even makes more sense with Khalil getting injured. The timelines can kind of match up. Also, Khalil should be fighting down. No clue why this guy got Ankalaev after getting slept by Yuri, losing to Alex Pereira. Like, I get he beat Fat Jamal Hill. That's very impressive. Washed Jamal Hill in 2025. But he should be fighting down. I know they're going to try and build up Robert Whittaker. Maybe get the Whittaker versus Costa rematch at light heavyweight. And I think this could be trouble for Khalil Rountree. Now, he probably would chin Robert Whittaker. But I think dealing with the movement and the jab of Robert Whittaker will be difficult for him. And the Robert Whittaker title run starts now. Again, it is ridiculous that they just kept calling this guy fat and he just looked slow on the broadcast when it was the best Robert Whittaker has looked in years. And his first fight at his new weight, they were like, he's huffing and puffing. That was a little bit true, but that was absolutely ridiculous how they treated my boy Bobby Knuckles. Let's move on to Nikita Krylov. Give Nikita Krylov Navo Sterling. Now, I think Navo Sterling, nice win over Ryan Kutalaba. Don't get me wrong. He needs a guy that's even close to the rankings. I think Krylov is that. Krylov is still crafty with his grappling, nice kicks, very chinny. I think this is just setting up another on a silver platter for Navo Sterling to get a KO. I get Navo Sterling wanting to fight like an Ozdemir or Benefield. That might make even more sense, but I don't care. Just get rid of Nikita Krylov. I like the guy, Nice win over Modestas Bukauskas, and people forget, man, back in the day, before kind of injuries and just old age took over him, he was pretty decent. But give Navo Sterling Nikita Krylov. Let's keep moving on to another matchup. Let's talk about Gable Steveson. Gable Steveson, you got DC and Joe Rogan calling this guy the best prospect to touch the UFC since Brock Lesnar. I don't really agree with that. It's decent performance against Elias Ellison. Showed a good chin, nice front kicks. Couldn't wrestle for shit and was getting punched in the face by Elias Ellison. Let's give Gable Steveson Jonathan Denis. Now, Denis is a pretty good striker, former Glory kickboxing guy. Got destroyed by Mario Pinto and kind of outclassed his last fight. I just like this because at least it's a step in the right direction for Gable Steveson. Not a ranked guy, but like a decent heavyweight, in my opinion. Jonathan Denis, who I think has talent on the feet and can test Gable Steveson and maybe chins him. Gable Stevenson's getting hit by Elisha Ellison. Why can't Jonathan Denis get this guy? Let's talk about Adrian Yanez. I mentioned Cody Garbrandt. I didn't mention Cody Garbrandt. I'm going to mention Cody Garbrandt real quick. He should retire. Now let's talk about Adrian Yanez. Adrian Yanez gets a big win over Cody Garbrandt. Had him, on jelly legs, knocks him out. Should be on a 2-fight win streak. Robbed against Ricky Simone. Let's give him Rob Font, the man who started the Adrian Yanez downfall. Adrian Yanez versus Rob Font 2. We will be back. Rob's lost 2 in a row to Chiwiwis and David Martinez. Get ready for your 11th loss, kid. You're getting chinned. You're an old fuck. And I like Rob Font. I'm sorry for saying that. But I like Adrian Yanez a little bit more. Adrian Yanez is getting a highlight KO on old 50-year-old Rob Font. Let's keep moving on. I'm moving through some of these prelim guys fast because I don't have storage I have on my computer. Let's do Luke Riley. Luke Riley needs a guy closer to the rankings. Let's give him Giga Chikadze. Giga Chikadze is just getting fed to more people. He's on a 3-fight losing streak. Lost to Arnold Allen. Lost to David Obamna. I'm terrible. And, what's his face? Kevin Vacheios. So he's lost 3 in a row. We've just fed him to a prospect, Kevin Vacheios, who sent this guy to the Shadow Realm. Let's send Luke Riley out there to put Giga Chikadze out of his misery. He looked very good against Kai Kamaka. Was getting his legs chewed up, but really impressive finish and good grit from him, and definitely increased my stock in Luke Riley. And I think that gets him right outside the rankings where maybe he does fight a top 15 guy. Maybe he fights a Vinicius Oliveira. This should be an easy win for him, but it's just a logical step up for him over a Kai Kamaka, you know what I mean? Let's go through our last 2 guys. Let's talk about Damian Pinas. Do him versus Baisengar Sutsukhaev. He called him out. I think this is winnable for Pinas in the sense that Sutsukhaev is very wild, emotes a lot on the feet, leaves himself very open to being punched in the face. Everybody seems to punch this guy. And He can grapple though, so I could see where he takes Pinas down and submits him, because Damian Pinas is still largely unproven. Again, he's a very talented athlete and has a lot of really good raw power. And I thought, was he getting outpointed by Cesar Almeida? Yes, but Almeida's a very accomplished kickboxer. And then, all it takes straight rights and straight punches against kickboxers. You will knock them out. I would probably say Pinas knocks out Suzukaev. I think Suzukaev just fights like an idiot and fights way too carefree. I'm taking Damian Pinas by round 2 or 3 knockout over Suzukaev. But if he gets him down, he could win. And we'll just talk about Farid Basharat real quick. You got to run Farid Basharat versus Ethan Ewing. The way John Garza was at moments piecing this kid up, I think Ethan Ewing would have a field day with Farid Basharat. And worst part about Farid is this guy begging for his job while being undefeated because he's boring. Like, that's insane. Imagine you're undefeated and you're out here begging on the mic talking about like you're gonna be champ one day, which you won't. And I just thought that was funny. And it's just like, I know you'll be back. He's getting, at times pieced up by a random high schooler who was kicking his ass. Imagine what Ethan Ewing would have done to this fucking bum. He would have had him crying, and he actually would have got cut. So when Ethan Ewing knocks you out, you will be cut from the sport. No hate, Farid Basharat. You seem like a nice guy who is decent at fighting, but I'd take Ethan Ewing here with relative ease. If you're new here, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for all love on TikTok, Instagram, social media. The doctor is signing off.